Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to talk about sentence elements. You need to understand that a sentence or a clause element is a constituent of a sentence or a clause structure. 7 elements combine to form the basic sentence structure. In other words, there are 7 elements that are necessary to form the basic sentence structure. And they are: number 1 is the subject. Number 2 is the verb. Number 3, the object. And you should notice that the object could be direct and it could be indirect. Also, there is the complement, and the complement is of 3 types: subject complement, an object complement, and adverbial complement. One more optional element is the adverbial. Let's go over these elements one by one. Let's start with the subject. Now, the subject is an element that usually comes before the verb in a declarative sentence, such as example number 1, we should consider the rights of every class. Now, the word we, this is the subject because it precedes the verb or phrase should consider. Sometimes the subject follows the operator in an interrogative sentence, such as number 2, should we consider the rights of every class? Now, should is the operator and we is the subject. A very important note you need to consider that has to do with the subject. There is something called Subject-Verb Agreement. Now, this is a general rule in which a verb agrees with its subject in number and person whenever the verb displays distinctions in number and person. Consider the examples that you can see in front of you. The dog barks. Now, the dog, this is the subject, and it's singular. Therefore, we added the third singular S to the verb bark. The same thing applies to the other example, I am thirsty. I is a pronoun, it is the subject, and am is the main verb. And there is a subject-verb agreement between I and am. The third example, the dogs bark. Now, the dogs is the subject and it is plural. Therefore, you can see the verb bark in its base form. And the fourth example, she's thirsty. Now, this is it's a pronoun and it is the subject. Therefore, we have the main verb in the form is. The other important and basic constituent is the object. You need to understand that when it comes to the object, transitive verbs require a direct object to complete the sentence. Look at sentence number 1. Helen wore a red dress. Now, a red dress is a direct object, and it is required because of the main verb, which is wore. Okay? Therefore, the object, and nonetheless is the direct object, this is a required element in this sentence. Also, some transitive verbs allow or require a second element, which is called indirect object. And the indirect object comes before the direct object. Look at example number 2. Nancy showed me her book. Now, the pronoun me is indirect object, and it preceded her book, which is the direct object. Sometimes transitive verbs allow or require object complement. As in example number 3, Pauline made him her understudy. Now him, this is a direct object. Her understudy is object complement. And in a few minutes we will explain what object complement is. Also, some transitive verbs require adverbial complement. As in example number 4, Norma put the cat in the yard. Now the cat is direct object, and in the yard, this is a prepositional phrase, and it functions as adverbial complement. One of the important notes that you need to keep in mind is that the direct object typically refers to the person or thing affected by the action. The indirect object typically refers to the person who receives something or benefits from the action. The object in an active structure, whether the object is direct or indirect, usually corresponds to the subject in a passive structure. To illustrate, look at the examples. The sentry fired 2 shots. Now, 2 shots, this is the direct object. And it corresponds to the subject if we were to make this sentence passive. 2 shots were fired. Okay. Take another example. Ted promised Mary 2 tickets. Now, Mary in this sentence is indirect object, and 2 tickets. This phrase is considered a direct object. Now, if we were to make it passive, one possible sentence can be like this one: Mary was promised 2 tickets. Okay, and also 2 tickets were promised to Mary. Now, the subjects in the last 2 examples, Mary and 2 tickets, correspond to because these are passive sentences, correspond to the direct object and indirect object in the previous sentence, which is Ted promised Mary 2 tickets. One of the basic constituents in sentences is the complement. A complement is the unit that may or must be introduced to complete the meaning of a word. Again, a complement is the unit that may or must be introduced to complete the meaning of a word. For instance, a preposition such as for is normally followed by a noun or phrase such as my best friend as its complement. So both parts, the preposition and the noun or phrase, constitute a complement for my best friend. In addition to that, you need to keep in mind that the complement could be of different types. There is the subject complement. There are 2 points you need to keep in mind when it comes to the subject complement. Number 1, the subject complement are required by linking verbs. Let me phrase it differently. Linking verbs require a subject complement to complete the sentence. The most common linking verb is the verb to be. And subject complements are usually noun phrases. As in sentence number 1, Leonard is Mary's brother. Okay, now Mary's brother, this is a noun phrase. Who's Mary's brother? Leonard. And who's Leonard? Well, Mary's brother. Okay, so it completes the sentence. and completes the meaning. Also, complements could be in the form of adjective phrases. Look at example number 2. Robert looks very happy. Robert looks very happy. Look in this sentence is a linking verb, and very happy is subject complement. There is the second point they need to keep in mind when it comes to subject complement, which is subject complement typically identifies or characterizes the subject. Okay, this is very important. The subject complement typically identifies or characterizes the subject. Moving on to the object complement. Okay. Now, again, complement could be, we could have subject complement and we could have object complement. The object complement has to do with the relationship between the direct object and the object complement. When you think of object complement, you need to keep in mind that the relationship between the direct object and the object complement resembles that between the subject and subject complement. This is one. Also, transitive verbs require or allow an object complement to follow the direct object. Look at the examples. The heat has turned the milk sour. Now, the milk is direct object and sour object complement. Look at example number 2. The milk turned sour. Now, in example number 2, this is subject complement. And if you pay attention to the object complement in the first sentence and the subject complement, then you could see the relationship between them. Now, when it comes to analyzing sentences, there is no escaping the fact that it would be better to understand the constituents in terms of form and function. And one of the forms that we encounter in sentences, different type of phrases. Now, phrases, there are different types of phrases. There is a noun phrase, as in our family. There is the verb phrase, such as was talking. And there is the adjective phrase, as quite old, or the adverb phrase, very loudly. And there is also the prepositional phrase, such as on the table. Let's go over these one by one in more details. Now, a noun phrase, this is the form, this is the structure, okay? A noun phrase is the structure. And what do I mean by a noun phrase? Well, in order to understand a noun phrase, you need to understand that the main word in a noun phrase is a noun or a pronoun. If the main word is a noun, it is often introduced by a determiner and may have modifiers. Pre-modifiers are modifiers that come before the main word, and post-modifiers are modifiers that come after it. Look at the example. An old quarrel that has recently flared up again. Now, an is a determiner, old a pre-modifier, quarrel, noun. All of this, okay, an old quarrel is a noun phrase. Well, why is it a noun phrase? Because we have a quarrel, sorry. Quarrel is the main word, and it's a noun. Therefore, this is a noun phrase. However, there are other parts. There are other constituents in this phrase, such as the determiner and the pre-modifier. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, what about a verb phrase? What do I mean by a verb phrase? Now, if you think about a verb phrase, then probably we're talking about a phrase that consists of a main verb preceded optionally by a maximum of 4 auxiliaries. Again, look at the examples. Anthony stroked his beard. Now, stroked, this is the main verb. This is the verb phrase which is made up of one word, made up of one verb. However, in example number 2, Alan has been working all day. Now, this is the verb phrase, has been working. And you should notice that this verb phrase is made up of 3 words. Has been, 2 auxiliaries, and working is the main verb. And there is one important thing you need to keep in mind when it comes to verb phrases. Verb phrases are the most important phrases in sentences, for the reason that we can contract a whole sentence into a verb phrase or just a verb. Look at examples number 3 and 4. You can say just look, and the hearer can understand what you want. And the same thing applies when you say help. Now, you can abbreviate the whole sentence into just the verb phrase, or especially to the main verb, and it makes sense, and you can communicate whatever meaning you have in mind. The other phrase is called adverb phrase. Now, the adverb phrase, in the adverb phrase, the main word is an adverb. You need also to keep in mind that other constituents often appear in the phrase are pre-modifiers, which come before the adverb, and post-modifiers, which come after the adverb. Again, pay attention to the examples in front of you. Quite neatly. Quite neatly. Now, quite neatly, this is an adverb phrase. But it is made up of 2 words. Quite, this is a pre-modifier, and neatly is the adverb. Look at the other phrase. Still, it's an adverb phrase. Very luckily for me. Now, very is a pre-modifier. Luckily is the adverb, and for me, this is a prepositional phrase which functions as a post-modifier. The one before the last, we have an adjective phrase. In adjective phrases, the main word is an adjective, okay? And also, other constituents often appear in the phrase, okay, in adjective phrases, such as pre-modifiers, which come before the adjective, or post-modifiers, which come after the adjective. Look at the examples. Quite hungry. This is an adjective phrase. Why? Because hungry is the main word. Hungry is an adjective. Therefore, this is an adjective phrase. However, it is made up of 2 words. The quite is a pre-modifier, and hungry is an adjective. The other example, very happy to see you. This is an adjective phrase. Very, the pre-modifier, happy is the adjective. To see you, this is a prepositional phrase which functions as a post-modifier. The last phrase that you need to know is the prepositional phrase. Prepositional phrase consists of a preposition and the complement of the preposition. Look at the example. For your sake. Now, for, this is the preposition. Your sake, this is the complement. Again, pay attention to the second example. On entering the room. On, this is a preposition. Entering the room, this is the complement. And there is one pivotal detail that you need to keep in mind when it comes to prepositional phrases. Now, prepositional phrases could play more than one function, as we will see in our next videos. In other words, the form, like this is the form, this is structure. The structure is a prepositional phrase. However, prepositional phrases could be adverbs of place or adverbs of time, or it could be something else. That's it for this video. Thank you for your listening and stay tuned for the upcoming videos.